welcome back to, or welcome to, if you're joining us for the first time, the Better Happy podcast for managers, hosted by myself, Mike Jones. What we're going to be talking about in today's topic is how to get better at decision making, which is something that's absolutely vital for anybody in a leadership or management position. And interestingly, nobody ever talks to us about this. We tend to get into leadership, management, and all of a sudden we have to make these decisions, which you've never had to do before. That creates new challenges for us, but nobody has a conversation with us about, right, now you're going to have to start making decisions. This is why you might find it difficult. This is what the common challenges are. This is how to overcome those challenges. This is what happens if you don't make decisions. So nobody has that conversation with us, and it's an important conversation to have. And if we get ourselves into a good place with decision making, it can be an asset. If we're not in a good place with it, it can be one of the most detrimental things to our performance and our overall life. So if we get good at decision making, we can get better results at work, we can get a happier team, and we can have a happier you. If we're bad at decision making, or we avoid decision making, which is being bad at decision making, that leads to poor results at work, it leads to a pissed off team, and it leads to a stressed out you and probably an unhappy family if you've got a family at home. So what we're going to go through today is 5 tips to help you get better at decision making. So tip number 1, why is it that we find it hard? So we need to understand, tip number 1 is, let's understand why decision making is hard. Now think about the word decide. It's got a commonality with 2 other words, homicide and suicide. And it comes from Latin, from its Latin roots, and the side part is to kill off. And if you think about it, if you decide to do something, you are killing off other things, you're prioritizing that thing over other things. And if you don't decide, you're not killing off the other things. Now this is why it's hard, because you literally are killing off things. It's difficult, it's scary, it's intimidating. What if we decide to do something, cut off all these other things, and it was the wrong decision? So it brings around a lot of fear, especially if you've been raised in a family or school background or corporate background where mistakes are really jumped on and kind of punished, or perceived mistakes. That can create a really poor relationship with decision making, because we fear cutting the things off and making the wrong decision, because we're going to get punished if we do something wrong. And what we've got to understand is, where does that lead to? And this leads into point number 2, which we'll go into in a moment. But if we don't make decisions, that's not good for anybody. It's not good for you, it's not good for your team, it's not good for your business. So we've got to be aware of the fact that making decisions isn't easy, and it requires essentially us saying no to other things. It might require us to challenge people. It might require us to start saying no to things that are getting thrown at us, or at least challenge them. And for many of us, we've never had to do that until we get to a leadership and management role. If you're in a business, it might require you to say no to things that customers are asking for. Some of the most successful companies in the world don't achieve success by doing everything that their customers ask. They give their customers what they need, not what they want, because it's giving customers what they need that helps you generate more money, helps you constantly sell. Whereas if you give customers what they want, you could be giving them everything that you can imagine, because people are always going to ask for more stuff. So you see this in businesses as well, with management teams. You'll see that other teams come to you and your team with tons and tons of requests, and a load of them are just a waste of time. They're just things they want that aren't a good use of your time. But if you're not good at saying no, if you're not good at making decisions, you're going to say yes to everything, which is going to lead to you being overwhelmed, going to lead to your team feeling overwhelmed, and going to lead to you feeling unfulfilled, because instead of doing a few things really, really well, you're doing everything just not very well, because you're trying to do so much. So understand that it's difficult, understand that it requires you to kill off other things, but that you've got to develop a discipline around that, because not killing off the other things will lead to a worse place. Okay, tip number 2 then is, the worst decision is no decision. And this just returns a little bit back to what I've just said, because a lot of this is mindset. But the worst decision you can make is to make no decision, because by making no decision, by default, you're saying no to quality. You are making the decision to say yes to everything. And you will tend to, and I'm talking from personal experience here, you will tend to avoid making decisions when you can, if you haven't developed a discipline around this, because it feels easier and less risky and like less pressure on you to just say yes to everything. But by not making decisions, you are by default choosing to say yes to everything and saying no to quality, or saying no to prioritizing things that are most important to you. So this is equally applicable whether it comes to prioritizing stuff at work, or even just engaging in a new habit outside of work, or joining a new gym, or doing a new thing for your health. By not making a decision, you're choosing to say no, essentially. So be really cautious of sitting on and not making decisions, because that feels more comfortable to you. If you want to make changes in your life, personally or professionally, or in your team or in your business, you have to make decisions. And by not making decisions, you're deciding not to do that thing because it feels a little bit more comfortable. So, I mean, it ties in with the next 3 points, but it's much better to make a decision and then learn from that decision whether it's right or wrong and grow, than it is to make no decision. Because even if you make the wrong decision, which there's a chance you might, you can still learn from that decision, fine tune, and get to where you need to get to. But if you don't make any decision, you're making no progress because you're scared of maybe making the wrong decision. You're staying where you are. Great leaders have got no problem making poor decisions. They've got absolutely no issue with that because they will learn from that decision and quickly adapt. They know that the poorest decision there is to not make one. Have I said decision enough in this podcast? This is going to subliminally put the word into your mind for the rest of the day so you can go and make better decisions. Okay, so number 3 then. So how do we go about making better decisions and quicker? Well, here's a really important thing that's been documented well by lots of psychologists and scientists, and that is trust your gut. So trust your instinct. Give your instinct more kudos than you might do already, because your gut isn't just this random feeling. It's years and years of intelligence and experience built up within your kind of DNA. So it's more powerful than you think it is. So I'm not saying that you should make all your decisions based purely on instinct, but I'm saying that you should give your instinct a lot more credibility and kudos than you probably do. If your instinct's telling you there's something to go, it's probably a fairly high chance that it's going to be a good choice. If your instinct's telling you no, even though all the intellectual advice around it tells you yes, there's probably a fairly high chance that it's not right. So give your gut more credibility than you probably do already. And what will happen is, over time, by doing that, you'll start to realize that it's a pretty good indicator of good and bad choices. So you trust it even more, which speeds up your decision making progress. So that's point number 3. Make sure that you trust and give kudos and credibility to your gut or to your intuition. Point number 4 then is limit your information gathering. So do your research, and this is one for me because I'm terrible for this. I'm a very analytical, logical thinker. So what I like to do is analyze the different options. Like, let's say I'm going to use somebody for a new service. I'm going to have geeked out on their books. I'm going to have read their reviews. I'm going to have seen if there's any positives, any negatives, and really kind of dig out on it. And now, obviously, that's good. It's good to, it's good to do some research. Sometimes you won't need to, but sometimes you will, especially if it's a large purchase or a big decision that's going to really change the way that you and your team do things or the way you live your life. So, of course, you need to do your research, but you, generally speaking, should try to limit your research. And what a lot of us do is we tell ourselves that we'll make the decision once we know that it's guaranteed, once we've done enough research to know that there's zero risk. And as you know, I'm about to say, the problem with that is that never happens. There's never zero risk. It's never guaranteed. You can never collect enough information. You can collect information infinitely. So be really aware of this concept and be really strict with it. So when you're trying to make a decision, maybe it's you as an individual or you as a team, and you go into the information gathering process, put a deadline on yourself and recognize when you are reaching the point of diminishing returns. You're spending so much time collecting information that it's becoming useless. It's just slowing down the decision making process. At some point, you need to make that decision. And all you want to know is that you did your due diligence. And if that then turns out to not be a good decision for whatever reason, you can then adapt course, which is moving into our next point. But if you just spend so much time gathering information, trying to make sure that everything's right and you've got everything in place, all that happens is you delay the decision and it doesn't get made. And in that time that you haven't made it, you could have been making improvements or somebody else has got ahead of you. So limit your time spent on information gathering. And then point number 5, and this is what cements everything together for this, for your new approach to decision making. And this is decide, analyze, revise. So if you do this, it doesn't matter what decision you make, you're still making progress. So what you do is you make your decision, as the name suggests. You decide, and you put a time pressure on yourself to decide, and then you analyze. You go into an analyze phase, and this is really important for your mentality, because we tend to think that once we made a decision, that's it, it's black and white, it's binary. But once we made a decision, that doesn't then mean we're fully committed to that thing. It just means that we're making progress, and we can of course adapt our courseway, our path as we're going forward. So once you've made your decision, then go into the analyze phase. So depending on what the decision is, ask yourself the question, how do I measure success in this area? So my background's in health and fitness. So for health and fitness, let's say I decide to go into a new program. Okay, now I could spend days and days and weeks researching which program's the best, to a point where I've lost weeks where I could have been making improvements. What I can do is I can decide to do that new program, and then say, right, when am I going to decide if there's efficacy in this program? So let's say, typically speaking, for training, 3 months is a good period. So after 3 months, I want to have reached these certain metrics or seen these improvements. If I haven't seen these metrics or these improvements, then I go into the revise phase, where I say, does it need to be adapted, or do I need to find something different? So that's following the process of decide, analyze, revise, DAR. Maybe I could make that time frame shorter, depending on what the decision is and what the program is and what the thing is that's trying to be improved. And obviously you can make that on a case-by-case basis, that how do we revise. There's a really very popular way of measuring results in a business, and this is called objectives, key results. So we set objectives, and then after each objective has been set, we follow it up with key results, which we decide by saying as measured by. So if I wanted to say I want to be healthier, I have to then put 3 metrics on that. As measured by, I can run a 5k in this time, I can fit in a 32-inch pair of trousers, and my body weight or my body fat percentage is this. So by applying measures, we then know if we've made the right decision. If we're not specific, and we struggle with being specific, because again, lots of challenges with our mental health around fear of failure and fear of not getting results, which we'll talk about in another podcast. But if we're not specific on what the results are that we want to achieve from the decision, it's then very difficult to know if it was the right or wrong decision. Whereas if we are specific, we can then very easily see down the line, whether it's a few weeks or a few months, depending on what the decision is, if that decision's been effective. So what this does is it completely changes the dynamic from being this, the right decision, the wrong decision, it's all on me, to, okay, I've done my due diligence, I feel like it's the right decision, I'm now going to measure it to see if it is. If it's not, fine, we'll adapt course. That's going to put you in a 10 times better place than being a person, which is a lot of us, by the way, that doesn't make a decision and just feels overwhelmed and stressed and frustrated in a sedentary state where we're not making any growth, because we're spending all of our time just overanalyzing decisions instead of actually making them. So I'll recap those 5 points. So the number 1 is understand why it's hard, and the reason that it's hard is the side part. It's to kill off other things, and you've got to make peace with that, because if you don't, you're just going to stay stuck in indecision. Point 2 is the worst decision is to make no decision. So by not making decisions, you are by default making decisions. So if you're a manager, you're not being a good manager by not making decisions. So be aware of that and be strict on yourself to overcome it. You're comfortably uncomfortable if you're not making decisions. Point number 3, trust your gut. Give your gut credibility. Trust your intuition. It's more powerful than you think it is. Point number 4, limit your time on information gathering. So be really strict on yourself. If you're like me and you tend to spend too much time on that, put deadlines on it so that you are not letting that run away, and put deadlines on the decision as well. And then point number 5, to wrap it all up, decide, analyze, revise. Apply timeframes to bigger decisions for when they need to be applied, but you can apply that to micro decisions as well. Once you embrace this mindset around decision making, you'll notice that you embrace it and implement it into very quick, short decisions, as well as bigger, longer term decisions as well. So those are the 5 tips. Just remember and take away from this that overall decision making feels scary. And it feels scary because of the negative voices that you have in your head telling you that you need to make perfect decisions and you can't make mistakes, and that's going to reflect badly on you. So overall it feels scary, but the only way to make progress in life and the only way to live life by design and to achieve great results is to get good at it, is to get good at making decisions. And the worst thing you can do is not make them. So write down these tips, think about decisions that you've been sitting on. My challenge to you after this podcast would be, think about something that you have not been making a decision on for an extended period of time that you know you need to, and go away and pick these out of these 5 tips. Think about which is going to help you the most and make some progress on that decision. Just go and make that decision now. And if it helps you, you can also decatastrophize. So you can say to yourself, what's the worst thing that's going to happen if I don't make the right decision here? And sit down and write this thing down, because in your head, without going through it properly, you probably see doom and gloom. You probably see the world's going to come to an end. I'm going to lose my job, or we're going to lose our house if we make this decision. I'm going to fall out with this person if I address this thing, whatever it might be. So write it down, because once you work through it, you'll tend to realize that the actual worst case outcome of you making the decision that maybe isn't the right one is nowhere near as serious as you thought it could be. We actually have a little template to work you through this called a decatastrophize template. So if you'd like that, please just drop me a message and we'll get that sent over to you. But yeah, write it down. Write down what's the worst case scenario, and you'll find that it's nowhere near as bad as you think it is. And once you understand that, then you'll start to, again, feel like making decisions is easier than what you thought it was. You probably just gave too much weight to the potential outcomes of not making the perfect decision. So go through that. So if you can start making better decisions and you can start being quicker with your decision making, it's going to be better for you. It's going to be better for your personal life and your family. It's going to be better for your team, and it's going to be better for your business. Remember, the worst decision you can make is to make no decisions at all. I hope that has been a useful whistle-stop tour for you on how to make better decisions. If you found it useful, please do share your insights, thoughts and comments, and just go away from this podcast remembering that life, teams and business are better.